The night of July 12, 1943, was thick with tropical heat and tension. In the dark waters of the Solomon Islands, a powerful Allied naval force sliced through the waves. This was Task Force 18, and it was on the hunt. At its helm was Rear Admiral Walden L. Pug Ainsworth, a seasoned American commander known for his aggressive spirit. His mission was clear and critical: to intercept and destroy the Tokyo Express. This was the nickname given to the fast Japanese naval convoys that regularly steamed down the slot, a dangerous channel, to resupply their beleaguered troops on the surrounding islands. Tonight, another such convoy was expected, and I was determined that it would not reach its destination. I commanded a formidable fleet. My force was built around 3 light cruisers: Media Group, USS Honolulu underway, USS St. Louis, and HMNZS Leander side by side. Black and white photos of named cruisers are distribute are equally. The American ships USS Honolulu and USS St. Louis, and the New Zealander HMNZS Leander. These were fast, modern vessels, bristling with 6-inch guns ready to unleash a torrent of steel. Supporting them was a screen of 10 destroyers, a mix of American and New Zealander ships, forming a protective shield and a deadly torpedo threat in their own right. We were sailing into one of the most fiercely contested patches of ocean in the entire Pacific War. Every island, every strait had been the scene of desperate fighting, and tonight would add another chapter to that bloody history. The target was a Japanese reinforcement group commanded by Rear Admiral Shunji Isaki. His force was smaller, centered on the light cruiser Jintsu, his flagship, and supported by 5 destroyers. Their mission was not to seek a major battle, but to deliver vital troops and supplies to the Japanese garrison on the island of Kolombangara. They were running a lifeline, a dangerous but necessary task to keep their army in the fight. Speed and stealth were their greatest allies. They hoped to slip through the Allied net under the cover of darkness, complete their mission, and escape before dawn revealed them to the ever-present threat of American air power. The stakes were incredibly high for both sides. For the Allies, stopping the Tokyo Express was essential to strangling the Japanese war effort in the Solomons and continuing their hard-won island-hopping campaign towards Japan itself. Each successful Japanese supply run prolonged the brutal fighting on land. For the Japanese, the survival of their garrisons depended entirely on these naval convoys. Without reinforcements and supplies, their soldiers would be cut off and eventually annihilated. As our ships closed in on the expected location of the enemy, the moon cast a faint silvery light over the sea, a silent witness to the impending clash. Aboard the bridge of the USS Honolulu, I felt a surge of confidence. The odds, I believed, were stacked firmly in my favor. My task force was larger, with more cruisers and nearly double the number of destroyers compared to the expected Japanese force. More importantly, I possessed a decisive technological advantage: radar. This miraculous technology allowed my ships to see in the dark, plotting the enemy's position and movements from miles away. In the countless brutal night battles that had defined the Solomon Islands campaign, radar had proven to be a game-changer, stripping the Japanese of their traditional superiority in night-fighting tactics. This confidence was bolstered by recent successes. Just a week earlier, I'd led a similar force to victory in the Battle of Kula Gulf. Although that battle had been a messy affair with losses on both sides, it had ended with the sinking of 2 Japanese destroyers and had successfully disrupted their supply operations. The men of Task Force 18 felt they had the measure of their enemy. We had faced the Tokyo Express and won. Tonight, with superior numbers and the all-seeing eye of radar, we expected to deliver an even more decisive blow, perhaps wiping out the Japanese escort force entirely and ending the threat for good. However, beneath the surface of this confidence, there were nagging concerns. Not everything was perfect within my command. Several of my destroyers were new to the task force, their crews not yet fully integrated with the veteran ships. Naval warfare, especially at night, required almost telepathic coordination, with every captain and crewman acting as part of a single well-oiled machine. Bringing new ships into such a complex formation was a risk. Miscommunication or a moment's hesitation could have disastrous consequences when shells and torpedoes started flying. The intricate dance of a night battle was no place for introductions. Another worry was the environment itself. The moon, though not full, provided just enough ambient light to be a nuisance. It could create confusing silhouettes on the horizon and potentially give a sharp-eyed Japanese lookout a glimpse of the approaching Allied fleet before the radar-guided trap could be sprung. Furthermore, the nearby landmass of Kolombangara Island cluttered the radar screens with ghost signals, making it harder to distinguish the true enemy ships from the shoreline. I knew that despite my technological edge, the slot was a treacherous place where victory was never guaranteed, and the hunter could quickly become the hunted. As the hours crept towards midnight, Task Force 18 adopted its battle formation. I arranged my ships into a long, single column, a classic naval tactic designed to maximize firepower. The destroyers were split, with a vanguard of 5 ships leading the way, followed by the 3 powerful cruisers, and then the remaining 5 destroyers bringing up the rear. This formation allowed the lead destroyers to act as scouts and to launch a surprise torpedo attack, while the cruisers could bring their main guns to bear on the enemy in a devastating broadside. The rear destroyers were in position to protect the cruisers, or to engage any targets that broke through the line. The atmosphere aboard every ship was electric with anticipation. Sailors stood at their battle stations, their faces illuminated by the dim red glow of battle lanterns. On the bridges, officers stared intently at the flickering radar scopes, their voices low and steady as they relayed information. Below decks in the engine rooms, men worked in the stifling heat, ready to answer the call for maximum speed. In the gun turrets and at the torpedo tubes, crews made their final checks, the metallic click and clank of machinery echoing in the confined spaces. Every man knew his role, and every man knew that the coming hours could be his last. The waiting was the hardest part. Meanwhile, unknown to me, Admiral Isaki's Japanese force was steaming towards us on a reciprocal course. Isaki's formation was different, tailored to his mission of escorting troop-laden destroyers. He placed his flagship, the cruiser Jintsu, in the lead, acting as a scout, and the main fighting element. Behind him, his 5 escort destroyers formed a protective screen around the transports they were tasked to protect. Their primary goal was not to win a gunfight, but to fend off any attackers long enough for the transports to complete their mission. They relied on surprise, speed, and the legendary skill of their lookouts, who were trained to spot enemy ships in the darkest of nights. The 2 fleets were now on a collision course, 2 blind giants closing in on each other in the vast darkness of the Pacific. My plan was to use radar to detect the Japanese from a great distance, maneuver my column into a perfect firing position parallel to the enemy, and then annihilate them with a coordinated storm of torpedoes and gunfire before they even knew what hit them. It was a textbook plan, one that leveraged all of my advantages. But naval battles rarely go according to plan, and the Japanese had their own doctrine, their own weapons, and a warrior's spirit that would not be easily broken. Just before 1 o'clock in the morning on July 13th, a shout of excitement went up on the bridge of the USS Honolulu. Radar contact. A technician, his eyes glued to the green sweeping line on his screen, had spotted the first faint blips. They were still far off, just ghostly echoes on the edge of the radar's range. But they were unmistakably ships. The position and course matched the intelligence reports perfectly. It was the Tokyo Express. I felt a grim satisfaction. The trap was about to be sprung. The enemy was exactly where I expected them to be, sailing blindly into the jaws of Task Force 18. The tension on the Allied ships ratcheted up another notch. Orders were passed down the line in hushed, urgent tones. Target, bearing 015, range 32,000 yards. The information from the radar rooms was relayed to the gunnery officers and the torpedo crews. In the plotting rooms, sailors frantically worked with dividers and rulers, charting the enemy's course and speed, predicting their future position. I ordered a change of course, turning my long column to port to cross the T of the Japanese formation, a classic naval maneuver that would allow all my ship's main guns to fire on the lead enemy ships, which could only reply with their forward-facing guns. However, the radar picture was not as clear as I would have liked. The proximity of Kolombangara Island continued to create interference, with the landmass reflecting radar pulses and creating false echoes or clutter on the screens. It was a confusing picture of real ships mixed with phantom signals. Was that a destroyer or a small outcropping of rock? Were there 5 enemy ships or 6? This uncertainty introduced a dangerous element of doubt. A mistake in identifying the main target could mean wasting the crucial opening salvo, giving the Japanese precious seconds to react and counterattack. Despite the clutter, the main enemy group became clearer as the range decreased. The lead blip, larger than the others, was correctly identified as the Japanese cruiser, the Jintsu. This would be the primary target. My plan was simple and brutal. The lead destroyers would launch their torpedoes at the Japanese column as they passed. Then, as the torpedoes were swimming silently towards their targets, the three Allied cruisers would open up with their radar-directed 6-inch guns and smother the Jintsu under a hailstorm of high-explosive shells. It was designed to be a swift, overwhelming, and decisive annihilation. At 1:08 a.m., the moment of truth arrived. The lead American destroyers were in the perfect position. On the command, "Fire when ready," the torpedo officers gave their orders. With a loud hiss of compressed air, deadly torpedoes, each packed with hundreds of pounds of explosives, slid from their tubes and into the dark water. Over 20 fish were now in the water, racing silently and unseen towards the unsuspecting Japanese line. This was the opening move, a devastating surprise attack that, if successful, could cripple the enemy force before a single shot was fired from the main guns. The crews who had launched them could only wait and count the agonizingly slow seconds until their estimated time of impact. Immediately after the torpedo launch, I gave the order I had been waiting for: commence firing. Suddenly, the night was torn apart. The main guns of the USS Honolulu, USS St. Louis, and HMN ZS Leander erupted in a blinding flash of orange flame, followed a split second later by a deafening, thunderous roar that rolled across the water. The big cruisers had opened up on their primary target, the Jintsu, which was now just over 10,000 yards away. Salvo after salvo of 6-inch shells screamed through the air, guided by the precise calculations of the radar fire control systems. It was a terrifying display of industrialized warfare. The Allied battle plan seemed to be working flawlessly. The destroyers had successfully launched their torpedoes without being detected, and now the cruisers were pouring an astonishing volume of fire onto the enemy flagship. On the bridges of the American ships, officers watched through their binoculars as the shell splashes from their opening salvos landed perilously close to the target. Corrections were made instantly. Up 200, left 10. The next salvos were even more accurate, walking their way directly onto the Japanese cruiser. The sheer weight of fire was immense, with the three cruisers capable of firing hundreds of shells per minute. For a few brief moments, it looked like a perfect clinical execution. The Japanese appeared to have been caught completely by surprise, just as I had planned. They were not returning fire, and their formation seemed to be in disarray. The Allied crews were confident, their training and technology giving them a supreme advantage. They were pounding the enemy flagship into scrap metal from a safe distance, all while remaining unseen. The first phase of the battle was a resounding success, a testament to the power of radar-guided gunnery, but the battle was far from over, and the darkness held more surprises than the radar screens could show. Just as the Allied gunners found their range, something extraordinary happened. A brilliant, piercingly bright beam of light suddenly stabbed through the darkness from the direction of the Japanese cruiser. The Jintsu had switched on its powerful searchlight and aimed it directly at the Allied column. In an instant, the tactical situation was reversed. The Allied ships, which had been hiding in the comforting cloak of night, were now starkly illuminated, their silhouettes painted as perfect targets against the black horizon. The sudden glare was blinding to the lookouts and bridge officers, ruining their night vision and causing momentary confusion and chaos. Why would the Japanese do this? Switching on a searchlight in a night battle was considered tactical suicide. It instantly gave away your position, making you the most obvious and vulnerable target on the water. For the Jintsu, already taking a terrible pounding from the Allied cruisers, it was a death sentence. The most likely explanation is that it was a deliberate, sacrificial act. Realizing his ship was doomed, Admiral Isaki, or his surviving officers, made a final, desperate gesture. By illuminating the attackers, they were pointing out the enemy's location to the other Japanese ships, giving them a clear target to aim their own torpedoes at. The effect was instantaneous and devastating for the Jintsu. With a clear illuminated target to aim at, the Allied gunners needed no further help from their radar. They poured a relentless and brutally accurate fire into the Japanese cruiser. Shells slammed into its thin armor, ripping through the bridge, engine rooms, and deck. Massive explosions blossomed along its length as its own ammunition began to cook off in the intense heat. Within minutes, the Jintsu was transformed into a blazing wreck, dead in the water, and burning furiously from bow to stern. It was a horrific, spectacular sight. At the same time, at least one of the American torpedoes from the initial spread found its mark. A huge column of water and flame erupted from the Jintsu's side as the torpedo broke its back. The combination of sustained heavy gunfire and the torpedo hit was more than any ship could withstand. The brave cruiser, having sacrificed itself to unmask its enemies, began to break apart. For the men aboard the Allied ships, it was a shocking and awe-inspiring spectacle of destruction, but in illuminating the Allied line, the Jintsu had given its comrades a final, crucial gift. The battle had just entered a new and far more dangerous phase. From the bridge of the USS Honolulu, I watched the destruction of the Jintsu with a sense of grim satisfaction. My plan, at least in its initial stages, had worked to perfection. Radar had found the enemy, my destroyers had launched their torpedoes, and my cruisers had obliterated the enemy flagship with overwhelming firepower. The Jintsu was now a burning, sinking inferno, its searchlight extinguished as the ship lost power and succumbed to its mortal wounds. It seemed like a complete and decisive victory. I had intercepted the Tokyo Express and destroyed its leader. I quickly ordered my ships to cease firing to conserve ammunition and to prevent the continuous muzzle flashes from giving away our positions any further. With the Jintsu out of the fight, I believed the remaining Japanese destroyers, leaderless and likely in chaos, would be easy to pick off. I ordered my column to turn, intending to pursue the fleeing remnants of the Japanese force and finish the job. The mood among the Allied crews was one of elation. They had met the enemy and had seemingly crushed them with terrifying speed and efficiency. The battle appeared to be won. However, the situation was far more complex than I realized. The HMNZS Leander, the New Zealander cruiser, was in trouble. During the high-speed maneuvering and the chaos of the gunfight, the long Allied column had become somewhat disorganized. The Leander had fallen slightly out of position. As the Jintsu searchlight had illuminated the Allied line, it had presented a perfect target profile not just for guns, but for torpedoes. The Japanese destroyers, far from being in disarray, had used the opportunity their flagship had given them. They had launched their own spread of torpedoes just moments before the Jintsu was destroyed. Unseen in the darkness, a single Japanese torpedo was now racing toward the Allied line. Its target was the HMNZS Leander. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the New Zealand cruiser, lifting it out of the water. The torpedo had struck amidships, causing catastrophic damage. Fires broke out. The ship lost power, and it began to list heavily to one side, crippled and out of the fight. My triumphant moment was shattered. I had lost a third of my cruiser strength in an instant, struck by an enemy I believed was already defeated. The battle was not over. It had just taken a shocking and costly turn. The torpedo that struck the HMNZS Leander was a terrifying revelation for the Allies. It was a Type 93, a weapon the Allies would later nickname the Long Lance. This was the secret weapon that I, frankly, had no knowledge of. The Japanese had developed the most advanced torpedo in the world. It was faster, had a much longer range, and carried a far larger explosive warhead than any torpedo in the Allied arsenal. While American torpedoes were notoriously unreliable and had a range of about 6,000 yards, the Long Lance could strike from over 20,000 yards away with devastating accuracy and power. This technological superiority explained how the Leander could have been hit. The Japanese destroyers, guided by the Jintsu's searchlight, had launched their torpedoes from a range the Allies considered safe. I and my commanders simply did not believe it was possible to be attacked by torpedoes from such a great distance. We'd been operating with a false sense of security, unaware that while we possessed the advantage in radar and gunnery, the Japanese held a trump card that could level the playing field in an instant. This single torpedo strike completely changed the tactical calculus of the battle. The chaos and confusion only deepened. As I tried to assess the damage to the Leander and reform my fleet, the Japanese destroyers were not idle. They reloaded their torpedo tubes, another capability the Allies did not believe they had, and prepared for a second attack. The night was now filled with conflicting reports, smoke from the burning Jintsu, and the glare of fires on the crippled Leander. Radar screens were still cluttered, and discerning friend from foe in the swirling melee became nearly impossible. The clean, clinical battle I had planned had descended into a frantic, close-quarters brawl. The surviving Japanese destroyers, having successfully delivered their troops to Kolombangara during the heat of the battle, now turned to escape. But as they did, they launched another salvo of their deadly Long Lance torpedoes towards the American ships. In the confusion, 2 American destroyers, the USS Gwyn and the USS Ralph Talbot, were also struck. The Gwyn was hit so badly that it would later have to be scuttled. The battle had turned into a disaster for the Allies. Though we had sunk the Jintsu, we had paid a terrible price. 1 cruiser crippled and 1 destroyer sunk, with another damaged. The Japanese secret weapon had completely surprised us. As the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon on July 13, the Battle of Kolombangara drew to a close. The sea was littered with the debris of battle oil slicks, wreckage, and the floating bodies of sailors from both sides. The once proud Jintsu had vanished beneath the waves, taking Admiral Isaki and most of his crew with him. But the surviving Japanese destroyers, having completed their primary mission of landing troops, had slipped away into the darkness, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. For me, what should have been a decisive victory felt more like a bitter defeat. I had succeeded in sinking an enemy cruiser, a significant achievement, but the cost had been unacceptably high. My force was battered, with the HMNZS Leander severely damaged and the USS Gwyn lost completely. I was forced to withdraw to escort my crippled ships back to the safety of port and to count my losses. The Tokyo Express, though bloodied, had not been stopped. Vital Japanese troops had been successfully landed on Kolombangara, meaning the brutal fighting on land would continue. The strategic objective of the mission had not been fully met, and the enemy had proven to be far more dangerous than anticipated. The battle left a lingering sense of unease among the Allied commanders. The revelation of the long-lance torpedo was a profound shock. It meant that the Japanese Navy still held a critical technological edge in the deadly art of night combat. Allied tactics, which had become reliant on radar-guided gunnery from what was thought to be a safe distance, would have to be completely re-evaluated. Every future engagement in the dark waters of the slot would now be fraught with a new and invisible danger. The enemy could strike with devastating force from ranges previously thought impossible, a truly terrifying prospect. The Battle of Kolombangara was, in the end, an unresolved and messy affair. Both sides claimed a victory of sorts. The Japanese had lost a cruiser but had succeeded in their strategic mission. The Allies had sunk a major enemy warship, but had suffered grievously in return and failed to stop the reinforcements. The fight for the Solomon Islands was far from over. As my damaged fleet limped home, the sun rose on a new day of war. The battle had been fought, but the conflict raged on with the certainty that more dark nights, more desperate clashes and more unforeseen surprises lay ahead in the struggle for control of the Pacific.